Welcome to the September 3rd, 2019 edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. For those in attendance tonight, there are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. For those watching at home, if you go to our website, downers.us, lower left-hand corner, there is a link for this week's meetings, which will show the same information as well as some of the live information we have up here. Sorry? I can try and talk louder. Thank you. We'll start the meeting tonight by rising together and saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
April, would you please? Oh, April's not here. Megan, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Puget?
Here.
Commissioner Kulavany?
Here.
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Mayor Barnett?
Here. Thank you. We're all 7 here. Thanks, guys. Before we go any farther, we have item 3 on the agenda, which are minutes from previous meetings for approval. Is there a motion?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. We're adjusting the agenda a little bit tonight with the mayor's report next because we have some appointees for boards and commissions in our community that we're going to make an appointment official this evening. This is a big job, and a couple of things I just wanted to mention. First of all, thank you to all the residents who apply for these boards and commissions. We have hundreds of folks who want to serve their community, and that's an awesome thing. And secondly, thank you to all my colleagues. You guys were all a big help this year in working through that process, and I really appreciate it. So with that, is there a motion to approve the, what do we got here? Resolution, sorry.
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council approve the resolution appointing and reappointing members to village boards and commissions as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all, and thank you all. Takes us to item 5 on tonight's agenda, public comments. Our meetings are structured so that we have a couple of opportunities for public comments. The first, coming right up, are comments on any items not on tonight's agenda. A little later in the meeting, as we go through the agenda, we'll also entertain additional public comments on each agenda item as we move through. So before we get into the agenda, are there any non-agenda items folks would like to discuss this evening? If so, please come up to the podium. Come to the podium, give us your name, and tell us what's on your mind.
Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just preface this by saying that I am deaf on this side, which is why I asked. Thank you. Again, good evening to everyone. I'm just reading from the handout that I have given you. It's my understanding that I have 5 minutes. Thank you. So good evening to everyone. My name is Chris Vosna. I'm a resident of this village and moved into my house 27 years ago. This is a synopsis of fears to my own and my immediate neighbor's health and safety related to an obvious threat from an immediate neighbor's property located at 1111 Blanchard Street, which is located directly west of my property. Excuse me, on approximately June of 2017, in other words, more than 2 years ago, we're now 3 years into this, a mature maple tree at the reference property, which stands over 75 feet tall, suddenly lost all of its leaves, followed by large swaths of its outer bark. It is important to note that 4 additional neighboring properties are also fearful of their respective health and safety, and I emphasize health and safety. I am a retired nurse anesthetist. I've given my life to people's health and to their safety. But that there are 4 additional neighboring properties who are also fearful. And depending on the trajectory this entire tree should fall, if you turn to the very last page, you will see an aerial shot in the middle of this enormous tree that is still alive. And you will see arrows pointed at the 5 properties that I'm referring to. You'll also note that right in the middle, you see a white square that says my house, and that happens to be a glass room. So you can see that I am clearly in the trajectory of this incredibly monstrous dead tree. Excuse me. During late spring, early summer of 2018, thunder and windstorms caused large upper limbs to break free from the tree and fall not only into my yard, but onto the power lines that run right in between our two properties and services electricity to the entire quad. Number two, subsequent to these events, I made numerous phone calls to various entities without any resolution of the health and safety hazards this causes to all inanimate and living things in a 75-foot radius of the reference tree. Note again that this includes 5 individual properties. Number 3, while I have contacted numerous individuals from various government groups over the past 2 years without any resolution, I offer the following listing of individuals that I have communicated with and offer apologies to all of you for failing to maintain records of the exact dates. Number 4, following is a listing of all communications excuse me, as to the best of the timeline in my memories. A, I contacted Rob Sandman, Village of Downers Grove Code of Ordinance to discuss the health and safety hazard and was told that the village does not have an ordinance requiring the removal of dead trees from private properties. B, I contacted a representative of State Farm Insurance Company who informed me that my homeowner's insurance policy has no jurisdiction over a neighboring property whose dead tree threatens all living flora and fauna on my property. Number C, I contacted a representative of the DuPage County Health Department complaining that this threat to health and safety and was informed that the DuPage County Health Department does not have regulations requiring anyone to remove dead trees from their property. Are you starting to see a pattern here, folks? Number D, I contacted Rob Sandman again as more limbs continued to fall into my property, at which point he directed me to contact Kirsten Vonderheide, village forester, who informed me that she did not have any authority to do anything regarding trees within the village except for within the village parkway system. Ms. Vonderheide then referred me back to Mr. Sandman. Again, I'm seeing a big circle going on here. Number E, I was sitting in my sunroom, as you noted in that previous photograph, just attempting to read a book. And out of the corner of my eye is this giant behemoth looming at me. And it got to the point that, you know, I feel threatened. So I called the Downers Grove Police Department. And I was then directed to the desk sergeant. And let me just find where I am on here. I explained that all that I have just stated to you, and he informed me that the police department does not have authority in this sort of matter and indicated that he would confer with Mr. Sandman because it was his understanding that code enforcement personnel would be the correct avenue to pursue. At this point, I informed him that the current ordinance enforcement officer for my property is a fellow named Dave Borman. Item F. My last call was to Commonwealth Edison, also on the 15th of August, describing my situation. I was informed that they too do not have regulations requiring a property owner to remove dead trees. One of their representatives, by the name of Rick, I listed his phone number, came to my home, inspected the reference tree, and informed me that in calm winds, if any limbs should break off again, they would fall just straight down by the natural physical force of gravity. We all know that the winds here are westerly, and on this particular day, guess what was happening? Big gray clouds were coming in from the west. So what he said, well, there's nothing we can do. And if they fall on the lines, call us and we'll come out and take them off immediately. My last item. Item G. I canvassed my immediate neighborhood to discuss the ominous health and safety hazard. Some of my neighbors are in attendance at this meeting, and I also have signatures of others who may or may not be in attendance, and you'll find them enclosed in this packet. I am retaining the original wet ink copies of this entire presentation. The reference property owner at 1111 Blanchard Street is well known to this governing body. because of his vast infringement of not taking care of his property, to the point of my understanding that you have even made lawsuits against that. Where am I at? That said, many of my neighbors, as well as myself, request that this governing body, who does indeed have authority to author, administer, and enforce property ordinances, to consider the swift creation of such an ordinance and enforce the ordinance immediately wherever required in this village to ensure the health and safety of all Downers Grove residents and visitors, particularly those who are babies, slowly moving children, the elderly, and all others who lack senses of vision, hearing, and or are otherwise infirmed. Does anyone have questions?
I do not. We probably all will, though.
I'm sorry.
I do not have any right now, but we probably all will. I appreciate you bringing this. This is really thoughtful and well put together. But it also is the first time any of us are seeing it or considering it. So we'll all take this. We'll discuss it a little bit. After, what we'll probably do is ask our staff to give us some additional input beyond what you have here, and then we'll decide whether or not it'll make it to another meeting in the future.
I can appreciate that. I
we-
would like for you to confirm to my ears and to all those present that you do, in fact, have authority to author an ordinance regarding the removal of dead, threatening trees from residents who own property here.
I'm going to tell you that we don't really know that. I certainly don't know that. What we'll do here is take this information that you've given us, send it to our staff, ask our legal department to weigh in on it. We do not necessarily have authority to create any ordinance that we like. We may. You may well be right, but us all having seen this now for 6.5 minutes, I don't think we're prepared to answer that.
If this governing body is unable to assist me, can you please give me a reference that I may contact?
We will. If it's beyond our
I'm going
scope,
into year 3 here, and this is unacceptable.
if it's beyond our scope, we'll let you know where we think it would be, for sure.
I trust that you'll contact me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Any other subjects not on tonight's agenda? Same subject?
Just a short item to that, please.
Yeah, hang on, there was one hand up. We're going to continue a subject here, and then we'll get, next, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Dave Pepelis. My residence is immediately west of 11 Blanchard on 1119 Blanchard is where I live. The resident next door, I just want to stress, I'm concerned also. It's unlikely the tree would fall my way, but it's going to hit his house if the wind comes. And the resident who lives there has been going on for 7 years now, avoiding, not paying fines, has other violations that has no bearing here, except that he has a pattern of not complying with codes in this town. I've complained about this for 7 years. This is just to add to Chris's, the guy's attitude is not, the gentleman's attitude is not respectful of his neighbors. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I would also like to add as well, in your packet,
Can you step up to the
Hang on
microphone?
one second. Hang on, guys. We got a couple of things we're trying to accomplish with a public meeting here. One is that everybody gets heard. The second is that everybody here gets to understand the comments. The third is that everybody at home that's watching on TV gets the same benefits. So to that end, it's important that we operate just from the podium, because at that point you're on a microphone and you're on camera, which is helpful to those that aren't in attendance tonight. So please refrain from just kind of raising your hand and starting to talk. I will make sure everyone gets an opportunity. We won't allow anybody to go unheard, but let's try and work in a little bit of an order. So on the same subject, go ahead, go back up to the microphone if you'd like to. You're welcome to.
sort of reminds me of the Robert's Rules of Orders. Please open your packets. You will pass by signatures from my immediate neighbors. You will see on the very first photograph. If you look at it closely, I am standing on the very corner of my property. You will notice that my property is surrounded by mature arborvitaes, but I am standing on my property. So I am respectful of my neighbors and do not encourage, even with my plantings, that might go into their space. So you can see the ominous nature of what I've been looking at for the past 2 years. Go to the next one. That is me standing right in my backyard, in front of the arborvitaes, in my gardens, and you see exactly where this tree is. If you were to take 10 steps, if I were to take 10 steps forward, I would be in that room, that glass room.
I think we're getting the gist of this.
Pardon me?
I think we're getting the gist of this. It's an imminent threat to your backyard. We are going to have to take some time, and are not going to be able to answer it
I'm just trying to put this
tonight.
in perspective, sir. And if you look at
Wrap
this
it
third
up.
photo,
Okay, wrap it up.
that is a close-up of a behemoth,
Okay.
of a multiple-ton tree. Again, you've already seen the last photo.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Other subjects not on the agenda, please, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Amelia Capolillo. I live at 4237 Lindley in Downers Grove. The property is adjacent, running parallel to Speedway gas station at 898 Ogden. I'd like to make you aware of the neglect of their maintenance of the property. Several sections of fencing are rotted, nails, rusty nails exposed, coming out of the slats. The 2x4s, you know, behind the slats are rotted all the way through. This has been rotted for years. There have been complaints for years. The fence is an L shape. It runs parallel to Ogden, and then it's parallel to Washington. There are homes over there that also complain to the gas station for months and months. They're ignored. Your code department was out last year, sent them a letter. It's ignored. This year, and this is a long-going history for 30 years of their neglect, they also have a panel of about 10 feet of brush running all on parallel to Ogden, parallel to Washington. It's all overgrown brush. Homeless people get in there, you know, animals. It's pushing the fence over. This was all cleared away when the property was rebuilt a few years ago. They did make them clean it out at that time, and they just let it go again. Now, there's been numerous complaints from everybody. It's unsightly. It looks terrible. The brush is, you know, 12, 15 feet high in places. Little trees are growing up. It's just, you know, it's a business that's making money. There's no deficit of revenue there because it's a very busy gas station. Now, your code department has tried, but my question to you is when notices are ignored, what do you do then? If they don't comply, they've been told to clean it up and they don't. So what do you do then? Do you start fining them?
We pursue. There is a process. I'm going to screw it up, which means council will probably be upset. But generally, we first start by a conversation because we'd like to obviously have a voluntary compliance. Then we issue tickets, and when those tickets aren't paid and the situation isn't rectified, we continue to process. Eventually, we can end up in the courts. But there is a process that's worked through. If code enforcement was out there and in conversation, I suspect there is a process in play.
Well, they sent them 2 notices and nothing's happened.
That unfortunately is often the case. You'll find that property maintenance all across Downers Grove, all across DuPage County is a challenge because there is a legal process that has to be followed, and it's generally never as quick as neighbors and residents would like it to be. But if code enforcement was out there last year, we're paying attention and we're on it.
Well, if you were on it, it's a few sections of fencing. It's not brain surgery.
No, I understand that, but we don't come to your property to fix something, and we don't go to their property. We work through the system, which is a legal-based system.
Well, how long does it take? It's been over a year.
It can take years. It just depends.
To fix a fence?
Entirely, yeah. It's not, obviously, it's not fixing the fence that takes years. It's getting compliance with our codes that sometimes does take a long time.
That's ridiculous as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
You have the authority. It should be a privilege to do business in Downers Grove.
I appreciate
and
that.
to let than any other business that I could just let my lawn go to and all of my maintenance and just say, you know, well, whatever, too bad, too sad.
I appreciate that it's never as quick as people like, but there is a process, and it's beyond just Downers
it's
Grove.
just
It
been ignored.
it involves the courts, and it's not up to us to dictate their pace. It's unfortunate.
Well, that's a disappointing answer.
Keep,
Thank you.
we're glad you're bringing it to our attention, though, because we'll make sure, we'll do a circle around back with our team and make sure that we are in fact on
I'm
it.
not the only residents involved. There's
Sure.
other residents in parallel acting that are involved.
Okay.
And, you know, it's ridiculous that somebody doesn't go out there. They're making money like there's no tomorrow. That's not a deficit of money for a few sections of fencing and a couple of landscapers to cut down that brush.
Yeah.
We
Biz-
have to live there
a
and look
bit-
at that.
I understand, which is why we have code enforcement, we have a
Well,
process, and why the courts end up as part of the
Well,
equation.
there's the media, right? There's Channel 7 News, let's get them out there. They can
Okay.
look at how they take care of their property.
Okay, thank you for
Thank you very much.
coming, I appreciate it. Any other subjects not on tonight's agenda?
Good evening, my name is Rose Kraft, and thank you for letting me speak. I've been talking about this on and off since 2015. It's about Oak Tree Towers, and it's about all the crime as far as theft and robberies and abuse of seniors there that's going on, and nothing's being done about it. I don't have paperwork with me now, but I've had it, and they keep stealing it on me. They come in our rooms when we're sleeping at night. I don't know how they're getting in, but they're getting in. And I'm not getting any help from the police department. I need to talk to you about that, but I don't want to do it here.
Okay.
And something needs to be done. It's been going on for 22 years. And I feel sorry for this lady that with the fence, and then for this man with the tree. He's 27 years. I've been there 6 years. I was called to investigate 6 years ago, and I'm still investigating. And no help from the town. Not the other mayor, not people on this board here that know about what's going on, and nobody's doing anything about it. Nobody. It needs to stop. I wake up, I got bruises, I'm cut, the blood's running down my neck, in my ear. I mean, there's a bad scene going on there, it needs to be stopped.
Okay,
I can't fight it alone.
okay.
Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Okay, that's 1110 Warren.
Any other subjects not on tonight's agenda? Okay. Thank you all for taking the time. Oftentimes, when you approach us on an evening, it's not an instant resolution, and I know that's frustrating, but this is part of the process, and we really do appreciate everybody coming and talking to us. We will work through things to the best of our ability within the laws and rules that we have, and if necessary, consider new ones. I appreciate everybody's time. With that, we'll move on to our consent agenda tonight. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We have no active agenda tonight, so that takes us to our first reading. I'm going to wait just 1 second as some folks leave. Thank you. The first reading process of our meetings is a little bit more like a workshop where there's no decisions made on the subjects that we're considering. It generally is an opportunity for our staff to report out workings since the last time we've met, for us to discuss things with each other, and for us to hear from the public on any of these subjects. So tonight we have a couple of subjects in front of us. The second one is going to have to do with the cannabis rules that we're considering. So we will try and work through that as quickly as we can. And what I'd like to remind everybody is to be respectful of the 5 minutes. It allows everybody a chance to speak. And also think about whether or not you're just repeating what somebody else has said. We are, in fact, listening. There are minutes taken. If somebody says something 17 times, it doesn't necessarily make it more valuable than 7. So just let's try and keep the meeting moving and everybody a chance to speak. We are not deciding on any of these subjects tonight. With that, Dave, over to our first reading.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. 2 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is consideration of an ordinance amending raffle license provisions in our local municipal code. This is a housekeeping amendment to make sure that our local ordinance is in compliance with state law, which was recently amended. no significant changes to the actual outcome of raffle licenses. If you have any questions, I think Enzo will be able to help you.
Any questions from the council? Are there any questions from the audience or anybody that wants to speak on our raffle provisions? Okay, let's move on. Thanks, Dave.
I thought the whole crowd was here for raffle provisions. The next item is the discussion to consider zoning regulations for cannabis businesses. As the name implies, this is a zoning or land use discussion about businesses related to the sale and other aspects of cannabis. It is not a discussion of the legal possession or use of cannabis or marijuana in the village of Downers Grove. Just as a reminder, the state law has passed the use and possession of certain amounts of marijuana and cannabis will be allowed throughout the state of Illinois starting on January 1st. So this is a zoning discussion, much like many other zoning discussions we have had over the years, like last year's discussion about downtown zoning. We do have a couple of slides we want to walk through. We have two presenters tonight. We'll start off with a zoning discussion with our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich, and then we will hand it over to our Chief of Police, Shannon Gillette, to talk about law enforcement impacts of zoning-related decisions for cannabis businesses. Stan.
Thank you, Manager Philman. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Dave said, along with Chief Gillette, I'm here to provide some information on zoning regulations of cannabis-based businesses. We go over 5 items tonight. General descriptions about cannabis businesses, Illinois licensing, status of other DuPage County municipalities, an idea that staff came up with and mapping it out, and then Chief is going to talk about some public safety impacts as well. So the first item here is a dispensary. This is one of the business uses. Really, this comes down to retail sales of cannabis items to the public. Generally, it's about 2,000 to 4,000.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I must have hit the thing when I was walking up. So this is similar to retail sales, which is a convenience goods in the zoning ordinance. The potential zoning impacts would be some odor when you walk past a place. Open the doors. Sometimes you get that scent of a fast food place or something like that. When we found parking and traffic, it's going to be a in and out type of place, so similar to like fast food, where we see a lot of in and out, people moving around and stuff. So that's what we sort of attributed it to. We're trying to draw comparisons to existing uses and use classifications in the zoning ordinance. Potential sales really vary. There's a lot of different numbers out there. You see some states where they've overestimated, some states they've underestimated. So this is what we estimate, $7 to $10 million, and then the sales taxes are potential existing, and then if we were to provide additional 3%, what we can see off of those. So this is really where you could go and buy cannabis from a dispensary. So this is retail sales only. The next one would be cultivation. So this is really about growing and processing the cannabis. There are no on-site sales here, so it's strictly sort of an industrial use where they're growing the cannabis. They can wholesale it to dispensaries or sell it to other dispensaries as well. Sometimes this could include processing the cannabis, and it could also include a transportation element. So some of these uses will sort of meld together. Some of them they can be separate if you want, but some of them also meld together as well. These can be up to 210,000 square feet in size, so really a big warehouse. Again, it's general industrial, and we would attribute the potential zoning impacts similar to an industrial manufacturing type of use. We might get some larger trucks, parking, and some items like that, and people actually working in the warehouse, but not that in and out foot traffic that you would see with a dispensary. And again, no annual sales at this location. The next one's a processor, so they would convert the raw product to the final product. Again, there's no on-site sales here. Approximate size is going to vary based on the business itself, and we again attributed this to more of an industrial type of use, similar to where people are going to be coming in, almost like a lab or a processing of these materials there as well. And again, no on-site sales at this location. Transporter is exactly what it says. They transport cannabis between one business and another. Again, no on-site sales. This is more like a trucking and transportation terminal. So we might get smells like a fuel odor. So if there's a towing company or something sort of similar that way, if there's a taxi, cab, dispatch center or something where there's a lot of trucks and cars parked there, and maybe storing some of the material between point A and point B overnight to get it from point A to point B. Again, no on-site sales here as well, so there's no sales tax. Now, the craft grower is interesting because it is a smaller sort of combination of all of these items here. So they grow and process the cannabis. They could also sell the cannabis to dispensaries, and they could have on-site sales. So really, this is a smaller scale item with a cultivation. The previous one was 210,000. This would be about 5 to 14,000 square feet plus a dispensary. So it's sort of like your microbrewery, where you brew the beer and then you can drink the beer there, purchase the beer there. So in this case, you could purchase the cannabis there as well. They might grow it in the next room and everything. And again, the potential sales on this varies, so it's really hard for us to put a number on this one there as well. So those are the business descriptions there. Moving on to the licensing. So available statewide by July 1st of 2020, there's 130 dispensary licenses. The village is in the Chicago, Naperville, Elgin region here. You can sort of see in the dark blue on the map here. So it covers all the way from the Wisconsin border down towards Kankakee and all the way west towards Elgin. So there's going to be 80 of those dispensary licenses available. When we move down, cultivation centers, all the licenses currently are taken up for the current one. And then craft growers and processors, again, those are the license breakdowns. And transporters, there's no limitation on those licenses. With regard to other DuPage County municipalities, only Villa Park is opted in at this point. Most everyone else is still in the discussion phase right now, so we really don't have a lot of other communities to compare ourselves to with council action. So in tonight's meeting, staff developed an idea. It's a zoning idea. Should council potentially allow these to go into the community? So first couple things with state laws. State law limits dispensaries. They have to be at least 1,500 feet from each other. So that's one thing that the state law does spell out for us. And it also allows us to impose hours of operation on these uses as well. So that's one of the two key things that state law allows us to do. So we looked at this and we looked at these ideas, what we could do, what we potentially couldn't do. And so we immediately removed residential and institutional uses, institutional zoning classifications from where these could potentially be located. So that takes out a lot of the town. And then we said, okay, we don't want it to be immediately adjacent to residential. So if you have a commercially zoned property and there's a residential zoned property before it, we're not going to allow that location. And then we said, okay, we don't want it to be within 1,000 feet of a daycare, school, or park. And so that sort of limited the map here as well. And then we said, okay, we don't want these necessarily to go in by right. We thought maybe if we were allowed, we want more of a special use, which is a public hearing process before the Planning Commission comes before the council for approval. And so we sort of melded these all things down here and said, okay, so a cannabis dispensary is really limited to retail sales, so it's more on a retail sales site, so maybe a special use in the B2, B3 districts. And then everything else, the cultivation, the processor, the transporter, those all seem like industrial uses. So those would be better in the ORM, M1, M2, which is our more industrial office research manufacturing districts. And then we said, okay, well, we currently have medical in those districts, so we could have the dispensary in there as well, because it's all sort of in the whole realm of things there. And then we said, okay, well, if we're concerned about the number of potential cannabis-based businesses in town, we can limit those permits to 3. So really sort of limiting that area. So using this as a guide, and we have a great GIS department here that helps us out with all this mapping, we developed this map with a 1,000-foot separation distance. So the areas here in aqua blue are all cannabis-related uses, so that would include dispensaries. So you see those in the industrial parks and some of our office research manufacturing districts in Ellsworth. And then the limited to dispensary only would be the purple. So that's going to be right now with the separation distances, principally Butterfield and then 75th Street. And then there's some parcels on the east side of Ogden Avenue that are just outside of that 1,000 feet of a separation distance from the parks as well. So then we said, okay, well, if we don't want these sort of one-offs out here, maybe we could extend the distance, separation distance. And so we did 1,300 feet of separation. So you still get Butterfield Road being open for cannabis dispensaries, and north of there and around the ORM districts to be a space there as well. And then 75th Street drops off, and then the two two areas up in here, and then there's one little parcel over there. They just drop off with 1,300 for separation distance as well. So that's what we looked at. It's really just an idea for council to discuss, so just a starting point for that as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Gillette, who can discuss some of the public safety impacts of this.
As the chief is coming to the podium, we often get asked, why 1,000 feet? Why 1,300 feet? They're both grounded in planning and zoning theory and have been applied throughout the United States, certainly in the Chicago metro area. 1,000 feet really has to do with the general size of residential neighborhoods and residential blocks. 1,300 feet is a quarter mile. 1,320 is a quarter mile. So quarter mile and 1,000 feet are traditional zoning separation distances, just for reference. Chief.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The first section of my report relates to public safety impacts of zoning cannabis-based businesses in the village of Downers Grove. These potential impacts are derived in part from a 2015 report generated by the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police. They gathered a group of police chiefs in a focus group to discuss their observations, concerns, and experiences over the first 3 years of legalized recreational cannabis in Colorado. Additionally, the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police has followed this legislation closely and has shared similar concerns on behalf of Illinois police chiefs. The first potential impact relates to DUI enforcement. There is a potential for an increase in local incidents of DUI should purchasers choose to travel to and from a dispensary while under the influence. Other enforcement issues include a potential increase in contributing to the delinquency of minor investigations related to those who might provide cannabis to underage individuals. Having a dispensary in the village could create easier access for underage consumption. There is a potential for a rise in illegal trafficking of cannabis that was legitimately purchased from a licensed business but sold on a local black market. Regarding dispensaries are a potential target for burglaries due to the nature of the inventory and the amount of cash that could be present on site in the business. There could be an increase in armed robberies in and around the dispensaries. Marijuana is still illegal at the federal level. Therefore, cannabis dispensaries are often cash-based businesses and could be an attractive target for armed robbers. Next, the Downers Grove Police Department currently conducts undercover compliance checks for liquor and tobacco licensees to monitor compliance with age restrictions and to enforce violations when a vendor sells to a minor. Additional resources will be required of the police department to develop policies and conduct those types of compliance checks at Downers Grove dispensaries. And finally, security plans need to be established and monitored for each business. The second portion of my presentation relates to state law requirements to address security in and around the cannabis business site. State law requires a security plan that shows the process to ensure that restricted access areas are limited to registered agents, service professionals, transportation agents, department inspectors, and security personnel. Businesses must store and dispense all cannabis from the restricted area when open and store all cannabis and currency in a reinforced vault when closed. Alarm systems must include perimeter alarms on all entry points with sufficient lighting to ensure surveillance is possible of the premises, and systems must also include a panic alarm button. The business must have a backup power supply during a power outage, and access points cannot solely rely upon electronically controlled entries. The security plan must also show controls to monitor agents and currency to prevent the diversion, theft, or loss of cannabis from the business. There must be a locked door or barrier between the entrance and the limited access area. The proposed floor plan and security devices must include cameras, motion detectors, servers, and video storage capabilities. It is mandatory that a licensed private security contractor be utilized by the businesses. And businesses must have a plan for record keeping and inventory, including communication with the state police regarding the disposal of cannabis. So that completes my portion of the presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Village Manager Fieldman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Gillette. I'd like to offer this brief recap of the presentation that we've just heard, because there is a lot of information. It is a lot to take in. First key point, this discussion is not about the legalization of possession and use of cannabis. That state law has already been made and will be the law of the land starting on January 1st. This is, of course, a zoning discussion. We've learned tonight about the different types of cannabis-based businesses and the categorizations thereof under the state law. We've also heard a little bit about the potential impacts of these types of businesses locating in our village, including the impacts on law enforcement. We've heard a little bit about a zoning idea, not a proposal, not a recommendation, just an idea to start a discussion. And that zoning idea is based on how this village has traditionally handled other zoning and planning issues. However, this zoning topic is slightly different than most zoning discussions in two ways. Number one, under state law, municipalities have the right to zone them out or opt out, not allow any cannabis-based businesses in our village. The other thing that's unique about it is villages, municipalities can limit the number of cannabis businesses in their towns. So in that aspect, it operates much more similarly to liquor licensing. So that is not quite a normal zoning discussion. So there are two additional tools and approaches we can use, opting out and limiting the number of businesses. I'm sure nobody has any questions or comments, so that'll wrap it up. No, of course, we expect a lot of discussion, perhaps a lot of questions from the council and the community. We're here to help facilitate answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. In this part of our meeting and these sort of first reading workshop items, we generally take an opportunity to have the council discuss. Council will generate some questions prior to the audience, so we'll be asking for public comments at some point in a few minutes after we've talked through this a little bit amongst ourselves. So with that, does anybody have any questions or comments they want to add to the conversation? Leslie, go ahead.
Okay. I have a couple comments, probably more for Stan, and a couple that are more for Chief Gillette, so bear with me. One hopefully quick question is that, for Stan, are there any known kind of like side products of the manufacturing process that would pose any sort of a public health danger, especially with those industrial areas, like if you were talking about some of the manufacturing, do we know of any?
I don't know of any research that's been done on that.
Okay. I know that in some of the materials that were provided to us earlier, there were a lot of mentions of odor control, and that Colorado didn't do that at first, but then had some sort of measures that were able to kind of take care of some of the odor issues. If that were the case, is that something that, if we decided to zone for that, would that be something we would look into and kind of dig into further, knowing that that's one of the biggest concerns of some of these businesses?
So some of that can be accomplished through an HVAC system that has filters. So I know a lot of the some of the more intense industrial uses have sometimes air filters and filters on their equipment. So I'm guessing we could probably find something like that similar.
Yeah, I know in the research that only happened about 2 or 3 years down the road. So obviously that's something that we would want to make sure to take care of earlier rather than later.
One of the reasons staff put in that zoning idea just for discussion was this idea of a special use. Special use under our zoning code allows the council to place conditions upon the operation, and this might be an issue that we could specifically put into any approvals to make sure that it's functioning properly.
Okay.
Those special use provisions, Dave, just for everybody's reminding, those can be, when not complied with, can be reasons for the special use to be revoked, correct?
Yes. A lot of towns call what we call special uses, call them conditional uses. I think that term is actually generally understood by laypersons. The ability to add conditions to your right to operate is really what that's based upon.
Thanks. Sorry, Leslie, go ahead.
No, it's fine. We might as well stay on the same topic. And now my questions are more for law enforcement. Do we have any updated data from maybe like the 2017 to 2019 range? I know that in some of the research that we were provided, Colorado Public Safety also just recently released a report in 2018, and it showed that some of the problems that you see are really have a sharp rise those first couple of years, and then when they work the kinks out, they kind of tend to level themselves out. Is that something that you would anticipate happening on its own with significant man hours, with what kind of a toll is this going to take on you in terms of man hours, and what do you think your biggest barriers would be for this if we were to allow businesses?
It's a great question, and I wish I had the answer. There's a wide range of the quality of data that's available
Sure.
out there, and we're looking at that very closely. We would be working, as we always do, very closely with Stan and community development and working on those issues, as well as working with area police chiefs on any trends that we see. So it's really hard to predict what that impact will be.
Sure.
It was really hard for Colorado to even articulate what they had seen for the first 3 years. It sounds like a lot of this data is still emerging. So I wish I had those answers to alleviate some of those concerns. I don't right now.
And one of the other benefits of the special use process, as outlined in the idea, is during the public hearing process, we would get a much better understanding of the exact operation being proposed instead of a lot of places. I think Colorado made some of those towns made permitted uses, and so you didn't really have a good handle. But under the special use process, then the police department and other village departments would be better able to determine likely impacts and what kind of operating impact it would have on departments, and that's why we would, if we went this way, we would be in a much better spot to articulate the impacts of a particular disease.
Perfect. Thank you. It's helpful.
Rick Coons?
Might be an air conditioner repair, let's hope.
I hope so. More? Okay.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Not so much a question as a statement. I want to first thank staff for all the work they've done on this. Obviously, a lot of research went into this, both in community development and at the police department. So thank you to Stan and Chief Gillette. The proposal, or the, I suppose, idea that's been put before us, I think is a good one. And I support that proposal. 1,000 feet from a daycare, school, or park is, if memory serves, 10 times the requirement for a liquor store. And I think that is a pretty reasonable place to land. It puts the sale of marijuana in regional corridors like 75th Street, like Butterfield, and small portions of Ogden Avenue, manufacturing in places where manufacturing takes place. I think these regulations are common sense. They fit with our zoning code and exceed the current zoning requirements on things like liquor. I think it's a good place to land, given the rest of our zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Others? Rich?
So what we're proposing would not allow the consumption on site at these retail locations, correct?
Correct. We have not put forth any ideas on on-site consumption. Our plan was to see how this first conversation went, and then if there was any further, anybody desired to talk about on-site consumption after this, we could do so. But there's nothing, not even an idea on the table yet for that.
Okay. In my understanding, it would not be legal for someone to purchase at a retail store, go out to their car and consume it in their car? That's correct. So the whole idea is they would have to take it to their private residence.
That's part of the state law, right?
Correct.
Yes.
It's part of the act,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's state law.
Other folks want to weigh in? Nicole?
Sure, thank you. I'm going to ask Chief Gillette to get his steps in today. So I have a question for you, sir. Thank you so much. And I think feedback from the public safety sector is extremely important in what we're talking about and in considering all this. As we've said before, there's a lot of layers. My question is, when the 18th Amendment was repealed in 1933, we had no way to test for DUIs. The breathalyzer didn't come to be until the 1950s. Is there any testing system in the works that would help the public safety sector to test for intoxication from cannabis?
I have read that some of that is going on in Canada, but there's nothing currently here and that's part of that broader discussion of the overall legalization of recreational marijuana. But I've heard that they're doing that in Canada. There's nothing that's proven science yet.
Nothing in the United States?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for you. And then just a couple more points. I actually appreciate the 1,300 option for separation and tend to be more in favor at this point of zoning in ORM, M1 and M2. I feel a little bit more comfortable with that than I do the 1,000 feet and some of the other options. I just want to throw that out there.
So as opposed to any consideration of B class?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Thank you. That is all.
And I agree with Nicole. I don't particularly want it in B. ORM would be suitable to me. 1,300-foot separation distance is actually what I asked for. I'm only interested in dispensary. I am not interested in any auxiliary uses. So that's pretty much where I'm at the moment.
Okay. Kevin?
Two quick questions. First, for Chief Gillette, so I apologize. First of all, thank you for presenting and helping us have a better understanding of some of the public safety issues. I'm kind of looking at this a little bit different. When I see what you presented, I see the first question I would ask would be, what would you say is the biggest concern? We've all been kind of filing through tons of data and tons of information, and that information can go left or right. You can do whatever you want to with data, some of which is still rolling out. But what would you say is the biggest concern that you have or your department might have as we look to process this?
I think the bullet points that we presented cover them. We began with, again, a broader conversation over the legalization of marijuana. It's a much bigger discussion that will present a lot of challenges for law enforcement in general, but that does not relate specifically to the zoning of businesses in town. Legalization is going to occur, and here that comes in January. So those are some broader discussions that we're having as a larger law enforcement community with other police leaders, with our departments, but not necessarily as specific to the zoning of the businesses in town.
And the other, I just still wrapping my head around our two parameters, kind of this 1,000 feet, 1,300 feet. And this is just coming from this strictly business perspective. When we think about retail, I think we're still thinking about location, okay? And so we understand the parameters that we have or the restrictions that we have as a village, but I can't look at what we have in front of us without really keeping in mind or factoring in the fact that we're still talking about retail locations, and the key aspect of any retail location really comes down in a lot of instances to location. And so if things are kind of on the fringe or the outskirts of what it is we're looking to do, then that's a consideration that I have to kind of process within the within the parameters of how we're trying to figure this out. So, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
If Rich wanted to weigh in, I didn't want to jump in.
Yeah, I have a couple more comments, but you can go first.
Just a couple of zoning-related questions that I didn't anticipate until I started hearing some of my colleagues. ORM districts, do they typically allow retail sales? My recollection is they don't, unless we made a change in the zoning code.
Principal retail sales, that would be a larger restaurant. So there's not a lot of retail sales in that. It's mostly office, laboratories, or industrial, or warehousing.
Okay, so but retail sales of some type of product are currently allowed in ORM districts?
I believe the only retail sales would be a larger restaurant in that zoning district.
I'm wondering if that causes us any issues in terms of other uses, if we're treating this differently than some other retail sale and what that might open us to in the rest of the zoning classification. I don't necessarily need an answer on that now.
think we're on much more solid ground, given the way the state law was written, that this is not quite a normal zoning discussion, given our ability to limit the number, opt out completely if we wanted to. So I think we're on pretty solid ground. We'll double check that with legal counsel, but I think we're pretty comfortable with the idea that's out there.
Great, thank you.
Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not a big fan of marijuana. I've seen it do some damaging things to people that are close to me. But then it occurred to me in talking to some of those people that they're going to buy it, and they're going to buy it if they have to drive to Villa Park or Lombard or where else it ends up. So the concept that strikes me is how far do I want people driving in Downers Grove to get it? What are the chances are that they're going to light up or consume an edible before they leave? In other words, how much further do we want intoxicated people to be driving? So my view is that the sooner that they can get home and the closer they are to home, the better. And even though I'm not a fan of the product, I'm also not a big fan of cigarettes or people who drink too much either, because of also similar problems they cause. And then my thinking goes to, if they're going to buy it somewhere and we have some opportunity for some tax revenue, that I don't want this to be a Yorktown situation when people say, well, do you know that Downers Grove had the opportunity to annex Yorktown and they turned it down for whatever reason? And boy, that was sure stupid in hindsight. So I think if people are going to do it anyway, we definitely have use for tax. We are a frugal government. We keep things low to the ground, and we operate in a very frugal manner, which means we don't have fat to cut out of our budget to do some of the things that we're going to need to do. The 1,300 feet resonates with me because it just figured out, well, that's a quarter of a mile, and it's pretty close to that. And I feel more comfortable about those particular areas. They happen to be located in the periphery. That means that we'll get people from places like Woodridge and perhaps Lombard and helping with our tax burden. So I look at this as a practical and a pragmatic nature. I don't think we're going to change anyone's mind about consuming or not consuming a product. I'm fairly opposed to types of businesses where they would consume it on site. So that's my 2 cents.
One more.
Thanks. Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was also thinking a little bit along the lines of Commissioner Gray of the business aspect, and I lean more towards the 1,000-foot just because you get a little bit more opportunity on 75th Street on Ogden, which are really primarily retail areas where you're going to be getting people kind of traveling back and forth for other retail opportunities. I am leaning like Rich and really like not interested in too much in hearing on-site consumption as well. Just again, odor tended to be the #1 concern in a lot of these areas, and I think it's behooves us to make sure that we are taking care of it from the business perspective before we start to get into it from a consumption and cafe type perspective.
Thank you. I have a couple of thoughts here myself, and then we'll circle back around and let the audience weigh in as well. On this, Chief, on this other enforcement issues, I'm looking at the bullet points, and it seems to me that the dispensary issues and the DUI enforcement issues are pretty directly related to whether or not we put something here. It seems to me the other enforcement issues, the potential increase in contributing to delinquency of a minor, investigations, having to run those down, or the risk in illegal trafficking are kind of marginally attached to whether or not we zone something here. To Rich's point, if somebody's legally selling it in Lombard or legally selling it on the south side of 75th Street in Woodridge or Darien, we still would potentially see some burden from those kinds of activities. Would that be fair?
We could, sure.
Yeah. Is there any requirement in the law, in the state law, or is there any freedom for us to employ or to require some of those sort of pre-plan kinds of elements. There's an awful lot of facility, it seems, definition stuff about security and the like. But in terms of fire and police, do we have the ability to require those kind of pre-planned efforts?
I believe we do.
We could? Okay. You know, one thing is, regardless of the ordinances, how do you know they're really being followed, right? So it'd be nice if we had some insight into that. This is a question really for Stan. Transporter was talked about and processor, and I'm just trying to understand the businesses a little bit. Is there such a thing in this market as sort of more pure distribution? I think that I was reading somewhere that transporters aren't allowed to store overnight in their vehicles.
Right, so they're basically taking it from point A
Sure.
to point B.
So is there a warehousing, regional distribution kind of process, or no?
I think that's probably through the cultivator is what I'm gonna,
Okay.
is where they would have they would have it ready and stored there. And then if they don't process it, the transporter would take it from the cultivator to the processor. Processor would make whatever they're gonna make out of it, do the finished project, and then the transporter would then transport it to the dispensaries or wherever they're gonna sell it.
But there wouldn't likely be any sort of mass storage of ready-to-use product.
Well, I think you could get it if you were a cultivator, because if you include processing and transportation in that, you may grow the product, store it, process it, store it again, and then transport it out.
Okay.
So I think that's where you would see sort of the larger warehouse, just based on the size, 210,000 square foot maximum as well.
I just want to chime in here. Enzonitis went to a state presentation on this, and they made it crystal clear that this was not a normal warehousing and distribution operation, that you would have to have a separate transportation state-issued license and a separate cultivation license, because they recognize the very different public health, safety, welfare impacts. For example, the transportation folks actually have to stick to pre-approved, state-approved routes and cannot deviate from them without notifying the state police. And so those types of things, they made it crystal clear what Stan was saying. Transportation is just A to B. Cultivation is simply what you see here, and this idea that there's big warehouse distribution centers.
Not part of it.
Not part of it.
Okay. Did I also read somewhere that the Act does not allow us to impose a local licensing fee?
That is correct.
So our only real opportunity for recovery in terms of costs would be if we ended up with a retail dispensary, right? I mean, the only opportunity for revenue to the Village of Downers Grove under this process would be a retail sales tax on retail sales.
That's correct. Please note, though, that there is a distribution of state revenues, of state taxes, back to municipalities strictly for use in the administration of this program and public safety-related items. So that comes to every municipality, whether they allow or don't allow any particular type of cannabis business.
Okay. Guess that was my list for the moment. Let's take questions or comments from the audience, and then we'll come back. Is that okay?
Sure.
Anybody from the audience want to weigh in on the subject or ask any questions about it? We'd certainly welcome those now. And if not, that makes our job easier, at least for the moment. Marge?
So that 2%, even if we chose to opt out, we got back to us for, was it 2%, or I'm sorry?
No, the 2% is our existing sales tax, the 1% municipal tax plus a 1% home rule sales tax. And that tax would be collected only if there were a dispensary retail sales in the Village of Downers Grove. There's another tax that the state put on cannabis businesses at rates like 10%, 20 and 25% based on the potency and concentration of THC that the state collects. Then the state takes a cut of all of that revenue for the cost of administering the program at the state level. After that, there's a distribution to municipalities on a per capita basis for the costs of local administration and public safety only.
Which we get whether we opt in or opt out.
That is
so
correct.
We do get something whether we opt in or opt out.
That is correct. Because of the impacts that the chief was talking about, Commissioner Gray was talking about, others have mentioned it too, that will inure to us just because it's legal to own and possess in the state of Illinois.
Okay. And then on top of that, then we get 2%? Or up, or we can do
2%
more?
plus whatever local.
Whatever
tax
local we
rate
could
is.
add
So
up.
potentially up to 5.
Potentially up to 5. So we're already getting 2 for anything. We could add as much as another 3.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was not as clear as it needed to be. Thank you.
We're just looking at the dollars, Bob.
Any other comments here? We're, again, not making any decisions tonight, but trying to work through this process. Any other questions, comments for staff?
I might have one.
Sure.
The numbers that we have been looking at state that there's a possibility of $300,000 in potential tax revenue. I've seen other estimates. They're all over the place. In any business being established, you can anticipate kind of this best case, middle case, worst case scenario. A best case scenario of that could possibly look like, say, $240,000 possibly, based off the numbers that we are talking about. That is if things are operating well. No glitches, no hitches. A 50% kind of middle case would have the village seat possibly, and again, I'm just talking numbers based on what was projected that municipalities could see. A 50% case scenario says that municipalities like ours looking to consider this could see $150,000. In the worst case scenario, possibly looks like, again, these are just numbers. We can make numbers move around and do whatever we want them to do. Just processing this from a numbers perspective, feels like just a lot of uncertainty. You know, again, this is just me looking at this. We have no idea. We have a possible idea of what numbers look like. I think we don't have a remote clue. And again, this is not a decision time right now, but I don't know if we have a clue about what the unseen costs look like that even possibly fall into this public safety realm as well. And when you start to balance those things against each other, that number that you think you will see gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I know there'll be another time for other discussions, but I just wanted to throw that out.
Commissioner Gray, can I ask, are those numbers that you're throwing out there, are they based on 3 dispensaries in town, 1 dispensary in town?
No. Without drilling down that deep, this is just let's take this great big pot of possibility that we could see. And if things were operating without any hitches for startup issues or small business, again, take any business, you're looking at a 9-month, 1-year window before things start to level out. We're talking uncharted waters with the same types of issues and unforeseen obstacles. And so, just an observation.
That's all true. I suppose, I mean, in that respect too, we could go with a total ban and just wait and see what other communities come up with, you know, around us, and see how it actually impacts them before we jump into the water. We don't have to do this. This is just where we were comfortable with. So, you know, the outright ban, I'm willing to talk about that if people are willing to talk about that.
I'm willing to talk about that as well.
Any other comments? I didn't weigh in on the 1,000, 1,300 issue. I'm not interested, at least at this point in what I think I know, on an outright ban. And I'm interested in 1,000 feet. I would say, though, to kind of Kavanaugh's point and to Marge's as well, you know, we all are going to have to figure out a spot that we are comfortable with, and it'll likely come from 7 slightly different reasons, wherever we land. But from my perspective, I don't think this is a financial decision. I just don't believe it is. The process by which there's licenses submitted and approved and distributed and where they can go, it seems like we would be way ahead of ourselves suggesting that we should do this because we think we might get X number of dollars. My own, just for my colleagues' understanding, as well as those watching and trying to understand the decision-making process, in my mind, it's almost unrelated to finances. So that's my 2 cents on that subject. So I don't have to cut this off. Anybody else? This is why we're here.
I just want to make
Nicole?
one quick comment. I am desperate for community feedback. Please engage us. This is not up to just the 7 of us up here. Please email us, call us, pull me aside on the street as long as I don't have my kids with me, because I prefer that they don't hear about the subject matter. But I'm desperate for community feedback because I feel like that is a huge consideration also in this very multi-layered process. So please engage us. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave?
Let's talk next steps and see if there's council directive yet. Next steps would be to direct staff to prepare amendments to our zoning ordinance for consideration by the Plan Commission at a public hearing. If we know what that direction is now, then the council could direct us to do so. What would happen then is a public hearing would take place based on a very specific technical ordinance. Public would weigh in on it, and then the council would be presented not only with a record of public input that happened formally, but whatever other informal public input happens, and a recommendation from our valued hearing body, the Plan Commission. So I just want to make sure, I kind of lost track of the count. I want to make sure where we're at. It seems like there might be some council members in favor of the zoning idea as put forth. The zoning idea being the not adjacent to residential, the 1,000-foot separation, special uses in the B districts in the ORM and M1 and M2 in the map that you saw. We also heard a couple of council members offer up support or able to further consider a 1,300-foot separation based on that construct. So I guess what I'm inarticulately asking is the council in a position to direct staff to prepare the zoning amendment similar to the idea with both the 1,000-foot separation and the 1,300-foot separation for the Plan Commission to hold the hearings on?
We all ought to jump in and give 2 cents on that. We'll just go down the road and sort of say whether we kind of agree with Dave's synopsis of what he heard. So,
Okay.
Rich, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so that would give us 3 more bites at this apple with the Plan Commission and then a first reading on their recommendations and their second reading. And some number of weeks, or depending what Plan Commission's got teed up, could be a couple of months. Yeah, I'd be in favor.
Leslie?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of that.
Nicole?
I just want to be clear, this does not bind us to moving forward with anything, correct?
No, all options are still on the table at all times, including a complete opt-out. Zone them out is still on the table.
Great, thank you. Then I'm absolutely in favor of seeing information.
Kavanaugh?
The same.
Marge?
I would have preferred to take retail out, but, so no.
Take retail out?
Take retail out.
Oh,
Out of the zoning, out of the zoning classifications.
Dispensaries only as special uses in the ORM, M1, M2 with a 1,300-foot separation.
Yes, that's what I'm comfortable
I'm
with.
going to write that down as no, because the way we just framed that off was that would not actually be proposed.
Correct.
It might be discussed, but it wouldn't be in the actual proposed amendment.
Correct.
So I have Commissioner Earl as a no to this concept.
Correct.
Greg?
Yeah.
Yes, you're going to do both. We're going to look at both 1,000 and 1,300. So yes. Did I hear that correct? Okay.
Thank you. So we will continue to communicate to the council and to the public as to what the proposal is for further discussion, making sure that everybody understands it is not a binding decision yet at all. We're on the very front end of this discussion. We'll communicate that to the council and to the public, and we'll schedule this up for Plan Commission consideration, and we'll keep everybody posted as it works its way through the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney's report.
One item, Mayor, that is an ordinance amending the raffle license provisions on next week's active agenda. That's all.
Thank you. Council member reports. Kevin, I'll start with you.
No reports this week.
Marge?
Ooh, can you come back to me?
Absolutely. Rich?
No report.
Leslie?
Just another reminder that Oktoberfest from the District 58 Foundation is coming up next weekend.
Cool.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. The Grove Foundation is holding its 27th annual golf outing fundraiser on Saturday, September the 7th, this Saturday, at the historic Downers Grove Park District Golf Course, which I've heard referred to by certain staff members as Downers National. The registration begins at 1 o'clock. Shotguns start at 2. It is a 9-hole scramble. There are golf contests, prizes, and a delicious barbecue dinner, all for $60. If you're not a golfer or you simply can't make it, you can join us for dinner at the cost of $20. If you want any more information, please check out thegrovefoundation.org, and you will find it all, as well as a registration form on the website. I think the Oktoberfest was covered, and I don't want to steal Commissioner Earl's thunder. I don't think I will. The 43rd Annual Downtown Downers Grove Fine Arts Festival is also on Saturday, September the 7th and Sunday the 8th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Please come and check it out. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Marge?
I'm waiting for it to load, so I had a date. The Friends of the Edwards House Historic Home Tour is still available. I am looking to see, I'm not positive the week of what weekend it is, so I didn't want to misspeak. But it is coming up, I believe, not this weekend.
September 14th.
Thank you, Rich. September 14th. And tickets are still available, and friendsoftheedwardshouse.com. You can get more information. And check out some really cool older homes throughout the afternoon on the 14th. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anything to add except to remind everybody that there are lots of cool things going on in Downers Grove almost all the time. We've got a fantastic community, and whatever your interest is, there are likely people working in town to make our town more valuable to you. So thank you all for bringing those things up. With that, on to the manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor Marnett. We are going to move into a discussion on the long-range plan, specifically on our facilities plan. It says in the agenda we're going to start in the committee room. However, we are inviting all council members and anybody here in the public who would like to join us on a tour of the police station. So when we reconvene in a couple of minutes, we would like to meet in the lobby of the police station.
Okay. So we'll take a little 5-minute recess, and if you want to go on the police station tour, join us over in the lobby of the police station. If not, thank you all for coming this evening.
Can I make a siren go on? Can I do the sirens?
Strategic goals, which will be updated after we get through this process. Identification and discussion related to key trends and issues. The development of solutions and strategies that relate to those issues. And then this process also will result in the establishment of priority action items that provides direction to the staff for the work plan to pursue over the next 2 years. We just saw the 2 buildings that really represent a number of deficiencies that fall into one or more of those categories. I really won't touch on that too much more. And over here, I did put, really for reference purposes, the history that we've been through related to facility planning. A number of efforts with plans going back to 2014, and prior to that, as I referred to during the tour, a facility condition assessment, which really laid the groundwork and provided some useful information on the condition of systems in all village buildings, but really primarily the police station and Village Hall. So I'm going to spend a little more time on the material that was just right behind me as a lead-in to the conversation, because obviously we want the discussion among the council members, engagement from the public to help guide the way that we go with this facility plan process. The facility plan ultimately will consider and provide answers to these key questions that you see listed here. Obviously, they're very in-depth and ambitious in terms of what's described. Questions like what improvements should be made to the police station and Village Hall, recognizing those are the 2 buildings that have significant deficiencies in a number of areas. And you can see a range of different options that might be considered. If we pursue replacement of one or both of these buildings, where should those replacement facilities be constructed? On this existing Civic Center site that the village owns, or some other site throughout the village? How much will the improvement cost? Obviously, key piece of information that becomes, can really only be known after we have a better idea of the scope and location of a potential project. The revenue sources that the village will use to pay for the cost of the project. Essentially, what is the financial plan that will support whatever council chooses to pursue? And then what other issues should be addressed in conjunction with the improvements to the facilities? So recently we had discussion related to the intersection of Washington and the railroad tracks, trying to improve pedestrian safety at that location. One other area that might be considered is the use of the Civic Center property as a resource for downtown parking improvements, recognizing that's also a topic that we're actively discussing and considering right now. So again, all of these questions are very important to the development of the plan that will ultimately be prepared. But for tonight, what we're primarily looking for is some discussion related to these three items here. A proposed approach and schedule that's summarized with these 3 points. That we will start at the beginning of the project with a detailed explanation of the issues to make sure that council members and the community have an understanding of what the broad array of issues are that are represented by these questions. We believe that it makes sense to begin at the beginning. Also, and relatedly, explore a wide range of options, that the options that we consider related to the scope of work, location, should be sort of broad in consideration of multiple options and putting forth of information that helps make the best possible decision for the community now and into the long term. And then thirdly, related more specifically to schedule, begin the work on the facility sustainability plan in December of 2019, recognizing it'll take some time to prepare for this conversation to begin in earnest. And we have a significant number of other projects which are consuming time of staff and the council leading up to the end of this year. That's why a facilities plan beginning in December is proposed. So what we're really asking the council for discussion and input on are these questions. Do you support the proposed approach and schedule? And if not, what part would you change and why? Mayor, I'll turn it over to you and the council.
So it's pretty straightforward. Part of our long-range planning, as we all know, feeds things like short and mid-term budgets, it feeds work plans, it feeds how we prioritize our time and our team's time. And so that's why this is one of the subjects that Dave just erased. That was at our LRP process, because it's necessary that we decide if we do want to start working on a plan or not. It is no small undertaking from any angle, whether it's staff load or cost or duration of the project or any number of issues. So we have to decide if we want to do something. So I'd like to see us go through and start by asking if anybody's got any particular questions about what they saw. But then get down to actually answering each of us and answering these questions in the middle of the board. The important thing, I think, that for tonight is in order for us to make progress, that we had, as was put up in red, not looking for answers tonight. That are, again, not unlike cannabis, there's probably 7 versions of what the answer to this question is. But the question is, do we want to move forward and try to figure out what the one we can all agree on is or not? I think that's more important for tonight. So, to that end, does anybody have any questions? Let's start there. Any questions with what was seen or questions with some of the process, what we're going to do tonight? Doesn't?
I mean, I just have a question about things that have kind of been done in the past, and
go ahead.
If there was any research, out of curiosity, is there, I know we've talked about potentially moving this to a different site, are there any security or like ease of use considerations, particularly for the police department, of where maybe an ideal location would be to get the most bang for our buck in terms of response times and things like that? We see a lot of security issues with the building itself, but does the location make a difference for our police department? Has that been
Yeah, so the first part of your question was, in our history of facility planning, and Mike only went back to 2012, it actually starts in 1999, I think. Was that broader question of could these buildings be somewhere else? The answer is yes. And ideas have been explored at various levels in terms of existing buildings in Ellsworth, to vacant, underutilized properties on Ogden. Those are the ones that really got some serious look-sees and analysis. There's been ideas floated like 63rd Street. There's been ideas floated 75th Street. To this question, are there any particular advantages to one location over another? Generally, yes, but not to the degree most people would think. Fire departments tend to operate at a home base, and then when they get a call, they move out from that and they cover a zone. Whereas the police patrols tend to occur in prescribed areas throughout town. They're mobile all the time. They're almost always in their zones or prescribed areas. So from a response time concept, where the administration sits, it's not really affecting the vast majority of response times on most calls. If we have a call that requires these folks to hop in a squad car, which is very rare, then yes, it would affect. But for the vast majority of calls, they're already in their zones, they're already there. So it's very rare that I would look out my window and see activity related to a call going out response time happening from across the parking lot. Did I capture that, Chiefs?
Or anything coming back in, there wouldn't be any concern.
Right. Now, coming back in from a service delivery standpoint for filing reports, for interacting with the police, yes, but more and more of our activities, not only at the police, but at Village Hall, are happening remotely through online alternatives. And the number of visitors to civic buildings, municipal buildings, has been on a steady decline for years.
Can I follow up with another question? Sorry. So from Village Hall perspective, and like your operations, what do you see as the core use of this building? I mean, building outside, but again, in terms of location, to figure out if we should look at a wide variety of locations or kind of keep it the same. What is there value in staying here and being in the heart of downtown? Would leaving here impact things negatively or positively? Kind of, how do you see that?
So let's start with the impact of the workers themselves here. What are the primary functions in this building, and how would it affect us in various locations? So number one, it's day-to-day activities of staff-to-staff interactions, the departments working together. Like tomorrow morning, we're all going to gather here for all department head meeting. We could go to more remote type and be anywhere, but mainly the number one activity is staff-to-staff connections. The next is staff to customer or resident interactions, primarily with community development department is probably our number one user of traffic in and out, followed closely by finance department related activities, water billing questions, utility billing questions, etc. Beyond that, meetings like this, where we have public meetings. Now, the public meeting aspect is a huge component of how we use this building. You don't really think about it until you ask Doug if a room is booked on a certain night, and the answer is almost always yes. So Plan Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, Stormwater, Transportation and Parking, the Park District is their building 58. So that is another big area. From the staff perspective, we can work from just about anywhere. You put us in any corner of the village, we can all get there. Except Mike really enjoys the location now because he can walk. And there's a couple folks that would be really close. But on a serious note, we really can work from anywhere. We also have the ability to work remotely, although given the fact that we are a municipality, that I think there are still expectations of residents and government workers be physically in a government building. The other aspects, I think I'll defer to Marge on the other planning aspects from the other perspective.
Well, some of the planning aspects, the comprehensive, when we talked about it at the comprehensive plan level, we felt like the police department could go any place. They don't have to be in the same building. They did feel that it was pretty important to keep the Village Hall itself centrally located in the downtown, recognizing that the public use aspect and just the availability of having the dais up and in kind of a more auditorium setting, that was, could be useful in other ways to the community if it was built right as either a performing arts center or whatever you would like to do. They thought that there was some in-between size venue, not as big as the Tivoli, not as small as the Masonic Lodge, but some smaller type, smaller side venue that this could become as well, that would give it more flexibility on the whole to the community. So that was just a give-take thing. It doesn't have to be combined. It could be very easily be separated. So.
And that being said, in this building, there's about 50-ish, 60-ish employees? 60-ish here, a handful more that are in the police station all day. So we are some economic benefit to wherever we locate. There's still lunch activities and before and after work activities, so in connection to the downtown.
Right.
But yes, all those things have been considered. No, there's no particular advantage to one place over another, but there's just all sorts of trade-offs, planning trade-offs, operational trade-offs. So.
Dave, continuing on that, yeah, obviously if we're going to consider separating the two buildings, we're looking at two new facilities rather than one. And that's going to create some financial difficulty, I would think. Also, if we were to move out of the downtown, we'd be looking at, or at least if we moved entirely out of the downtown, we'd be looking at losing the opportunity to TIF this property and use that revenue in order to help finance the construction of the new property, or the new building, is that right?
Well, there was a lot in that question, Counselor.
Yes.
I will tell you, I think
yes,
I think all those things, yes, from the staff perspective, all those trade-offs, two buildings more expensive than one, advantages to tying revenue sources, both down payments of sale of land and ongoing in terms of revenue streams with certain financial tools like tax increment financing district. These are great conversations about specific answers to this. So I might put a council member or two on the spot and go, okay, why don't we move to this? And is there anybody, Leslie?
Well, so that was helping me with number 2. I am very much for one starting at the beginning of the project. I think even though we have done this before, it is never bad to repeat it again for the public, for council. Just as a recap, things can shift dramatically within a year or two, and I am very much in favor of making sure that we are doing this, in a very structural way. From 2, I'm interested in exploring a wide range of options for most things. I would lean towards keeping the property right here on the civic property. I think that there is something to be said for being in the heart of the village. If a business comes into town, if they visit Village Hall or for whatever reason, I think there's value in them seeing everything that we have to offer.
So I thought I started to write down an LSF right here.
Mostly good, except for the location, I'd be a little bit less flexible on.
So I'm going to take that as you want only the options on this property.
Yeah, I would lean towards that, yeah. And I'm good with the timeline.
We are going to have to do this exercise to get to the point where at the end of the meeting, I think we've got some direction. So those aren't bad questions at all. Everybody should ask whatever questions they want. Would expect to keep coming back to this question about putting names up by these 1, 2, and 3 views.
So let's just make sure we all get that. So when I wrote down only options on Civic Center property, that would mean that all of the other options, maintenance, renovation, addition, replacement, every other thing is still on the table. The only thing where it would get constrained is this one, right? So as Leslie's example, only that one would come off. So that's really kind of the direction we're looking for as we go through this tonight.
Rich?
And after sitting in this room a number of evenings over the last 4 years, I've come to an opinion that's almost 180 degrees opposite. And let me explain my feeling for that. What we've asked developers to do is come in and put a new development with some kind of transit-oriented development or medical office building. And we have this 8.1 acre space that we've been dealing with. But we said, you can do anything you want here, except you have to carve out at least half of that for us, right? So you put in what you want, but we have to carve out our section. And then this end to the east, we have all this maintenance stuff. My view is this is probably some of the most expensive property in Downers Grove. I think we should build a durable building. I don't think we should repurpose. And I'm a historic preservationist, so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. These buildings are not suited for repurposing, just because the layout's not there. You can't turn a school bus into a minivan and expect it to, do what you want to do. So we're sitting on 8.1 acres of the most valuable property in Downers Grove to house, our basic functions. I don't think we have to be in the most expensive properties where location. I think we should build quality. I think we should build something to last. So 100 years from now, people say, wow, they sure built this thing to last. We don't have to do this every 50 years. Plus, you're not going to put this operation in a strip mall, right? You're not going to have partition walls and be able to put gun ranges in and shackle people to the drywall, right? It's just not going to be suited for that. So what I think Willis Johnson said it well is you have other less expensive spaces. Instead of us saying why we can't do that, let's try to figure out why we could do that. So my view is we go to a developer and say, hey, you got 8.1 acres of space here. We think townhomes made sense because the people said they didn't want 70 feet height. It's not zoned for that anyway. It's zoned downtown transition. I think people felt that that was a good mix of housing stock here. And it also avoids having to move twice, right? We can move everything out, get all settled in, move once, and then take everything down and put in, I don't know how many townhouses would fit in here, and I don't know how much you could sell 8.1 acres for. So $1 million an acre?
I'm going to take that, well said, I got a lot of notes there, but I'm going to take that at number 2, as Commissioner Colavani is saying, only options other than the Civic Center property. That's what I think I heard in terms of the approach here, right? So we're off to a great start. We have one commissioner says only here, the next commissioner says any place but here, right? There we go.
But on the questions of 1 and 3, starting this project from ground zero and getting going at December 19 kind of timetable, would you be thinking that's a good idea to get?
Oh, I think our community is well expecting us to move forward in this. I think people were frustrated by the process. I think people were frustrated by all the different choices. And then we got this option that people seemed to like with the townhouses, but it didn't pan out financially. 2 phases. The townhome developer wouldn't take the risk. We would be, holding the bag on that. And then the thing fell apart. And then we also had to wait till our downtown built out to see how that would work. And we have the beautiful view of hindsight that it's turned out really successfully. People are shopping downtown, they're dining downtown. Even driving around on the weekend, people are walking to restaurants and things like that. So that whole thing is playing out nice. We've absorbed the additional traffic. A lot of those people are taking the train to work. So I think we've had the value of time that's shown us that. I think we need to move forward. I think it's the expectation. It's kind of a basic function of our job.
So yes or no, start at the beginning of the project with a detailed explanation of the issues.
Well, I think we've already defined what the issues are.
So
Yes or no?
So yes or no?
well, jump in where we left off.
So jump in where we left off.
Except for the Civic Center.
Jump in where we left off, but consider options elsewhere.
Well, so we had all the other history. I mean, we looked at repurposing, remodeling, renovating. It didn't make sense. It sounded like it made sense to have the combined building. And from what I've seen in other municipalities, they do that.
Okay. I'm going to start that with, let's pick it up where we left off.
Yeah.
Okay. And we can always come back and adjust. We'll get the benefit of hearing everybody else, and we'll see where we're at. Okay? Good. Got you there, Scott.
Who else wants to jump in next?
I'll just jump in. I think just playing the catch up on this history. I've gotten some great information from you, Dave, from some community members, and so getting caught up on each of these iterations, as you said, dated back to '99. That's a lot to take in. But just from what I've seen, and just kind of coming in as Leslie's saying, I would like to see us start at the beginning. And I think one of the notes I made is that it looked like there was enough information. There's a ton of information. A lot of you have sat through this before. There's enough information that you can start from the beginning without starting completely over. And that's one of the things I remember writing down. Like, wait a minute, there's enough here that it's not go back to go. You know.
Unfortunately, Mike has given the introductory portions of this speech several times. So, but on a serious note, the start from the beginning, it actually isn't a ton more work to be done.
Right.
It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of communication. Okay. Excellent.
And as far as the options, the word that I keep hearing in my head is law of diminishing returns. Okay, and so some of you have taken this tour before, you've seen the facilities. I can't get law of diminishing returns out of my head, meaning that as you throw good money at a bad situation, that's hard. So from my perspective, I'd like to see the one option of new facility on this location. I think I've had enough time in the village to kind of drive around. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I've seen enough, been here enough years and seen enough of the area to kind of have that decision, and I'm okay with the December 2019 pushback, given what's on the plate currently.
Can I pop in and clarify that I also support new facilities and not renovation of these?
Anybody, I'm just going to maybe short circuit it right now. Is anybody thinking that the next round of options should include a good look at maintenance and renovation?
No.
No.
Okay, that's helpful. That's a big start. Very helpful. So now when somebody says, I'm open to all options on a particular location, those all options are really just down to additions and new construction. That's what I'm hearing that this council said.
I'd kill addition.
I would kill addition too.
I'd kill addition.
Yeah, we're going to.
So, what I'm hearing now is this council is saying new construction options, and the only sort of more options on that is where. Some are saying Civic Center only, some are saying anywhere but Civic Center for now. So you said Civic Center only, right?
Well, for me, it's tied to the economics.
Yep, understood. Okay. Well, that really hones us in pretty quickly.
Well, we got more council members.
Yep.
Way in here, so we're going to go next. Cool. Mark?
So, to me, starting at the beginning of the project, that signals to me exploring both options here and options elsewhere. If we're starting, so I guess, where is the beginning, if you will? I don't know exactly where that falls on the spectrum. So when I see that, I think, well, if we're in favor of starting at the beginning, then shouldn't we be looking at all options?
Well, I think you can,
So,
let me chime in here. Let me give you an example of we're going to start at the beginning, but we're not going to look at all options. For us, start at the beginning is making sure that every council member understands in depth what the issues are and what we've looked at in the past and what we did. And then the next step of that is take the community with us.
Right.
So we could sort of start at the beginning, but when we get to step 2, instead of saying we're looking like this options, we're just going to look at these options. I think that's okay to do, and we could deliver that.
Kevin was using the term, I think you said, start at the beginning but not over.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, I'm trying to get an idea of where it falls on the spectrum. Where does the beginning fall?
It's probably the distribution of information.
And so,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I am for beginning work in 2019. I am torn on, at the moment, how I feel about current property as opposed to elsewhere. Yeah.
So that would be, that sounds like you were willing to explore options.
Right.
Yeah. That's an answer.
Yeah, that's great. New construction, but explore location options.
Yeah.
Okay. And this will put you down as a, sort of in the Kavanaugh camp of, yeah, but don't reinvent the
Right.
whole thing.
Yes,
Be
please.
very expensive,
Yes.
what Leslie was saying too.
Yep.
right? So this is, I'll mark in here, this is really a bring the community and council with us exercise.
Yeah, I'm
not
kind of in the
necessarily
middle of
start over,
those too, yeah. I definitely think with anything, we need to engage the community as we did before. If not more so if possible.
I agree.
I know, Leslie, I think I heard you also say, yeah. Okay.
Well, I think Rich hit a lot of my points on the head. I think you've seen a lot of discussion of density downtown, a lot of discussion of townhomes that for various reasons, and you can throw me in as one of the reasons why that project didn't move forward when it did. I think we've talked this issue to death. The community's been engaged on 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 opportunities just since I've been up here, and that doesn't count the party back in 1999. So, you know, thank you. The council has engaged and engaged and engaged and engaged. As former Mayor Tully said, unlike a fine wine, these buildings have not gotten better with that age. We need to move forward. I would pick up where we left off. I am not interested in moving off of this property. One of the first and most frequent pieces of feedback that I can remember getting when we first started talking about the option of moving to Ogden Avenue was, heck no, I want my village hall downtown. I don't know why we would build 2 buildings rather than 1, so I think that means 1 building here. If we were starting over again, would that necessarily make the most sense? No, and I wouldn't leave Fleet where it is either, so I sympathize with where you're going on this. I really do. But I think there are a number of economic reasons also to keep it here. We've covered some of the community engagement, but when it comes to picking up and moving, we're talking about now selling this property, including a building that we consider to be in at least good repair in Fleet Services, and reconstructing those facilities someplace else, which is going to involve the purchase of land that we do not currently control. There's a price tag to that. So we're, instead of using the funds from the sale of this property to help finance construction, we first have to take the interim step of actually purchasing the land. And there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to do that for the same price or less as we're selling this property now. I think it's likely, but is there a guarantee? No. On top of that, we lose the option of TIFing the property that we have here and using the proceeds from that TIF district to work in our favor in terms of financing the project. So I think moving off of this property is a detriment to the community in terms of engagement and in terms of where they expect their seat of government, and I think it hurts us economically. So I think we stay here.
New here is the set of options you want to talk
Correct.
about. Okay.
And I would absolutely pick up where we left off. Townhomes seem to be the option that folks felt the best about in terms of density. It provides, it's sort of transit-oriented while also not providing the same sort of density and traffic impact challenges that we saw people concerned about with regard to apartments, despite the economic benefits of the additional density of the apartments. So I would pick that up, and in terms of the timing, I'd rather send you right out to bid now to find a townhome developer and get this moving, but if you're telling me that December 2019 is the earliest you can do it, then I'll take you at your word.
It's not the earliest we could do it, but you'd have to kick all the other projects aside. So you can direct us here. You can say, no, I don't want to wait till December. I want to do an RFP now. Let's go.
I would put it out on the street.
Can we TIF a remote property?
If it qualifies, which means that it qualifies under the state law and has certain characteristics that would qualify it as blighted or conservation area. Without getting too much in the weeds, I think we'll have to very quickly pick this up, sounds like very soon, maybe in December, or Greg has his way at about 9:50.
I think I'm losing that argument.
There are certain limitations on the use of TIF increment for public buildings. You can use them to build public buildings if you have to relocate a public building to make way for the private investment, which is why we could use it here. We put it in a new TIF district. It's unlikely, and I just don't want to say anything absolute here without a legal check. I wouldn't count on using TIF increment to build a building for us in another TIF district.
Because TIF is an important part of this.
Could be. I mean, we made a lot of assumptions right there. We started to sort of, a couple council members started getting into a particular financial plan without staff showing any of the actual options, but yes.
Well, I think everybody here, I am going to just on that finance thing speak a little out of turn, but I'm pretty sure that everybody here would like to do something at the lowest possible cost, whatever it is.
Right.
And TIF, you said it's important, it really is. I mean, there's an opportunity, and if a TIF vehicle is used, it's one of the ways to keep the new cost of residents down as low as possible.
So then it gets to be, what's the definition of blighted? Is
Lucky for
Meadowbrook
us,
blighted?
Lindsay can tell us under the state law with a little help from a consultant.
Greg, did you have anything more?
Yeah, no, I think we've covered
Pick
it.
up where we left off, move as fast as we can, looking at new construction at the Civic Center only.
That's about it.
I want to know what happened to the 2007 plan. It's fallen right off the history.
Yeah.
And in that one, we were actually picking up more property and moving the building even further to the front of the property towards downtown, which I suppose is maybe goes to, do we explore a wide range of options? I would say yeah, and that could include adding property to this property, not just making do with the property we have. I think we have to begin beginning. And I'm fine with December.
It's down to me, huh? I'd like to pick up where we left off, although I'm not quarreling with Kavanaugh's description. I think when Greg says we've talked about it, collective we, village has, but those responsible for making a decision need to be as current and informed as possible. I'm separating, I'm splitting hairs a little bit there. What I worry a little bit about is when we say start at the beginning, that there would be some sort of new engagement of the community at large to say, should we or shouldn't we do this? And if we're looking for just sort of cover in that sense, I don't really have much interest in that anymore. I think we're past that. But everybody that's involved in making that decision has to be fully current. So that's a non-answer to your question, but I think not starting over.
Well, I heard that as bring the council along and not so much necessarily take extra steps.
That's a good interpretation, yeah. Exploring a wide range of options. I suspect, what I think I know is that Greg is right from a financial standpoint. And so my answer to that is, again, a political non-answer. Unless there was some financial reason that it was better, meaning an ultimate lower cost to the residents, I don't have any interest in moving. I think that probably is likely here, whether it's a little bigger here or...
But in all fairness, we can't actually answer the question unless you direct staff to go ask it.
No, I know. We're talking through it. You have to let me talk through it before you can throw my initials on something. So, because of that, I really think that we need to operate here. That would be my direction. If there was some ENZA-derived thing that made us think we could do something that we don't think we can do with TIF, I'd want to know about it. But I don't think there probably is, because again, it's not like we're starting this conversation. ENZA's been looking at TIF eligibility for a decade and a half, something like that. So
Two different TIF laws, by the way.
I suspect what we think we know about that is accurate.
So I won't put your initials up here on this one until I get to go ahead, but I heard that
Yeah, you need to do this with me just like you did.
as new construction options at the Civic Center property.
Yeah.
And I would modify mine with if TIF available.
I understand what's driving your direction, so we'll take a quick look at this. We'll do some back of the napkin type. Nobody does back of the napkin anymore. We'll do quick spreadsheets. I say we, Mike, in finance too,
Whiteboards.
right? So we'll quickly boil that down to the essence of, is it cheaper potentially to go somewhere? Is it a better use of money? What is the tool really available to us?
And that's the only reason why I said explore
Okay.
as
Okay,
well,
got
because,
it.
I mean, so.
Okay, so we'll take that
if that
as, we'll
doesn't
do a
make
quick
sense, then-
check-in on the financial tool of TIF, and if it doesn't start to pan out quickly, if it looks like it's not giving us the returns we're looking for, we'll switch back here.
I was just intrigued by, could we get $8 million for this space?
I think we can run a couple scenarios. We'll figure out where the break-even point is likely and figure out if it's remotely close to delivering what you were talking about, Rich.
Because $8 million plus a
Yeah.
TIF seemed to be a magical combination.
Yep. Okay, so we'll add that to our list.
Yeah.
It's really sort of a gut check on the TIF financing. Gut check on off-site TIF financing and what that really brings. What is the value? What is this sort of realm? If it doesn't start to pan out, we're going to quickly move off of it.
Yeah, I just feel like it's due diligence.
Yep.
So on the last one, I'm first of all quarrel a little bit with wording, even though I know it's the right word, but sustainability is starting to be like fingernails on a chalkboard for me. Replacement plan is the way I would frame that up. But I know that's the better term.
Well, it started as this, but if the council direction there holds, it really does become a...
You know, part of it, when you go back to the community, we need to be talking really clearly, because hopefully the community's listening. And so the things we say matter. And in my mind, that's a more accurate description of where I would like us to be. I'd like us to be talking about a replacement plan.
I think everybody has said that tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Bob's right. I think sustainability is a little bit too vague when we're coming to this.
Okay. That's clearly some great direction we've received quickly here tonight.
In terms of when, I share Greg's urgency on this, but I also know that probably we have an organization to move, not just 4 or 5 of us in one night. So to that end, I think I'm happy to stick with that December 19th. If we're actively working on it then, I'd be feeling good about it. Does anybody want to, after having listened to each other, want to throw something else in the hopper before we take some input from our visitors tonight? Okay, does anybody that joined us this evening want to add to the conversation or ask a question about what you heard? Willis, go ahead.
One thing that I hadn't given any thought to until tonight when it was mentioned, it would seem like we might want to, as part of this, look at changing the zoning. You know, I don't see transition being part of this. You've got apartment buildings across the railroad tracks. You've got apartment buildings on the other side of Curtis. So it would seem that there's no reason at all why you couldn't go beyond 3 stories on this property. And I still, as I said a couple of meetings ago, you know, I'm in favor, obviously, of it going outside of downtown. I don't think it needs to be downtown anymore. We talk about the amount of work that is being done or interaction that is being done electronically, and I think there's less and less need for Village Hall to be centrally located, if there is any need at all. And even though the chief is not going to leave on a moment's notice, it still would be more convenient if it was located in the area of the underpass, which I think has made a huge difference to this community. Plus the fact that I think this property is very valuable, more valuable than what it would be in the industrial park or some of the other alternatives that might be available. And even though I saw a note someplace about a redesign of the Washington crossing, I don't know how much you're going to be able to do to really make that crossing effective. It would be, more residential would require less traffic, and it is a problem. It's a problem with the commuters. It's a problem backing up down Washington Street. It just seems like it would make a lot more sense to have the property located someplace, to have the village hall and the police station located someplace else.
Thank you. Willis, would you go 70-foot tall here?
I'd be in favor of it. I mean, it's what, 72 feet or 6 stories and
6 stories,
or
70
3
feet.
stories.
Well, here it's 3
I
stories,
think the
36
transition
feet.
is 3 stories.
Downtown transition.
I suspect that given the council direction tonight, as we get into the actual planning of what improvements and who are our partners, I suspect we won't constrain the discussion based on zoning. I suspect we'll look at options, including flexible approaches to zoning like planned unit developments. So I just suspect that's where we'll probably go, recognizing that we start from a position of the underlying zoning.
This seems like townhomes in the middle of would not be as appropriate. You're really going down based on what's on each side and the relationship to the tracks.
Anybody else want to jump in? Todd?
One of the things we hear about is this Washington Street, and I take the train downtown, and you can't teach people not to go around when it says not to go around. So how many, even one accident is too many, but how many accidents are there? Sure, the traffic's backed up, but every road around here is under construction or being torn up because that's the time of year. But how many, is it just the inconvenience of people having to wait in there? Are there actually a lot of accidents? I'm not talking about the people that commit suicide and stuff like that, because that's a totally different situation. But we talk about this being such a poor intersection, but as somebody that takes the train every day, yeah, we sit there and wait, and the train comes here and you wait, and then it goes back in. But so it's an inconvenience for 3 minutes, 4 minutes. So at the end of the day, I don't know that how much impact that's going to be. And to put apartments here, I don't know how well leased Burlington is, or Main and Maple. Those are still in their lease-up phase. So I don't know that we've seen the full impact of transportation and traffic in this area. But I remember I was just thinking about it as Greg said to start as soon as possible. It reminds me of the guy from Oak Tree, when you guys were talking about that, and the guy says, I don't care what you do, make a decision, because I'm waiting for one of those 2 bedrooms. And it's gone on way too long. And certainly you guys need to do something. And we're throwing good money after that. You just put a new boiler in, I think, or something, a couple $100,000. Yeah, we can use it or sell it, probably sell it for scrap value. But I think, let's get going.
Can I jump on something real quick that Todd said? Burlington Station at their ribbon cutting was fully leased, and within the last month or so. And as far as Main and Maple, last I heard it was around 80%. Anybody have it?
Yeah.
They're full now.
Nearing close.
Nearing?
It's in that 80 to 90.
Enough that we went ahead and commissioned the parking counts on those, which we'll be seeing soon.
Very good. Sorry to jump in here. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
I have 2 comments. One is I'm troubled by the idea of relying on financing other than the citizens of the village. Because it's a village facility, it strikes me that if you're being fiscally responsible, the people who live here and so on pay for the facility. A second comment related to the idea of new construction is that based on the tour, one of the problems that I don't know that I've heard much conversation about is the fluctuation that we see both in terms of the way the village hall was used, is used now, and the equivalent that we heard talked about in the police station, where you had construction of the police station with an expectation of a certain level of demand, and then that demand changed over time. If you're going to put in new construction that lasts decades, let's say, how do you anticipate the need for that flexibility if in fact that should arise?
Yeah, when we, earlier, the start of 2019, we were in a design mode with an architect on a combined village hall and police station. And one of the number one things we kept driving home was that very issue. We know for sure that we don't know what the future is going to bring in terms of demand and use of the space. We know that flexibility in the design of a new building is key. Being able to move within and without being able to expand and shrink became a major driver of design. I suspect that will still be the case as we enter it in the next round.
Well, if that's the case, then if you're talking about one building, for example, how do you accommodate the need for whatever the strengthening is that police stations are supposedly needing these days to survive disasters? I assume village, or maybe I'm wrong, do village halls have the same expectation?
Depends on what they're going to be used for in terms of disaster planning and responses, so the answer is maybe. Now, to answer your question, how do we know? We were literally weeks from finding out what the architect was going to put on the table for that design perimeter. So we don't know. That's right where we left the story. So we gave that direction. We didn't hear back from the architect as to their ideas on how to actually deliver that. So we were close.
Because the strengthening part strikes me as saying more money to do that strengthening, but are you implying that there's a way to strengthen part of the facility and not another part?
That's my understanding. Mike?
Yeah, a large portion of the police functions were in the lower level of the building, the combined facility that was being designed. So just by the nature of
so the hurricane blows, the tornado blows the top off, but the police station can
through the walls and the roof of that portion of the structure, we're able to achieve those hardening requirements.
Can you speak to my first comment, though? I've always been bothered by the idea that a village like Downers Grove ever uses TIFs, because my understanding is that TIFs were originally intended to be used for literally blighted areas, not by areas that are trying to finagle ways to avoid raising taxes on people in a particular area.
So one of the questions that's going to have to be answered as we make our way through this is a financial plan. And I heard all council members say that they're open to all of the options in all the other categories. And so I don't think that's been asked or answered yet with this round. I think I speak for everybody that want to understand the pros and cons, and then they'll give us direction.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. That was the case before. We were given a set of options and tried to pick something we thought made sense. On the broader scope of should the residents pay for it, the residents pay directly in property taxes about 25% of operating the village, and even less if you include debt service. So we, by and large, as a community, for as long as we've been a community, have relied on people other than our residents to pay for core services, buildings, operations, everything. We try real hard to keep that down.
My recollection, though, is that in recent years, every plan that has been put forward relied on outside sources of revenue.
But TIF dollars are property tax dollars like anything else. It's just a matter of where they go and what you can use them for. So they're not coming from residents of Woodridge or Darien or Wheaton, or as much as we might like that. It's still Downers Grove residents' tax dollars. They're just being used for this particular purpose.
But you're right. Your recollection is correct. We have looked for as many possible sources of revenue to minimize the overall cost to our residents as possible.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
And that's what I'm troubled by, because it's a public facility. My God, what am I
We're
missing
sitting
here?
on a lot of land here, and if you're going to use a TIF, using a TIF to redevelop it would mean that everything we sell off, the tax dollars that all of a sudden are now generated, because none of this is paying tax, it has tax dollars associated with it right now. We're sinking them into it, but we're not generating any tax dollars on this property. But once you sell off a portion of this property and you develop that property, all of those taxes can be recaptured to sustain the development on this property. And they're all
we see stories about how, for example, in the city of Chicago, there's the much derided selling of the parking meters, for example. There was the sale of the Skyway, and all of these domains that were originally public domains that are no longer public domains. So part of my concern in this case is that if you're not collecting taxes now to pay for facilities now, then down the road, when you're going to have to build it again, or whatever would be required down the road, and you're selling property now, what are you going to sell then? That's my point. If you're not collecting taxes and you're using the property as an alternative to collecting taxes, then somebody down the road, some council 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, when they're not collecting taxes, aren't going to have property to sell. It's basically saying, why aren't you collecting taxes to pay for what you need?
Well, but what's happening with the TIF is that the new taxes that are generated within that district are going to get rid of the debt for that. Like, for instance, the last time was TCD2 and the parking garage and the streetscaping and all the infrastructure that was put in. So the incremental taxes that were received were then allocated to the village.
So one of the things that staff will do when we get the direction we start answering these questions, like we've done in every one of these other iterations, is first answer the question, how much we think it will cost, and then go through options of revenue sources and financial tools. And ultimately, they each have trade-offs and pros and cons. I think you've hit on a couple of them, and we'll just present them all here, and we'll see where this group of 7 wants to go. But we will go through all that. There's been a lot of talk about TIF because that's what the last 2 were anchored on. But we will go through and show the impacts if we don't use TIF. We'll show the impacts if we do, various other financial sources as well. There were multiple revenue sources and multiple financial tools in all of those plans, not just TIF.
To your other point, David, about 1979, as Downers Grove, particularly in the south portion of Downers Grove, was still being built out in that time. We're landlocked now. We're getting our incremental growth in downtown areas. But there was still a lot of major subdivisions that went in on the south side of Downers in 79.
Also, Mr. Rose, I just wanted to also take you up to that. I think this village team agrees that the sustainability aspects, even if we replace, are important to us as a community. One of the things we've learned over the last several years is that we always have to be thinking about maintaining and replacing even the newest buildings. And we've set up a major buildings fund, which gets better funding every year, so we don't find ourselves wondering how we're going to keep these buildings going. So we've done a lot better job of that in the last decade or so.
I just had a quick side note. On the plan went away, but what stopped us from actually getting the deliverable on the last set of plans? What happened between?
Our development partner withdrew from the operating agreement.
Okay, and that just kind of shut us out of kind of being able to
all
see.
of our money went with it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
$8 million.
Yeah. I didn't know if we had any kind of front end insight as to what that facility looked like. Just kind of. I didn't know if we had plans floating around anywhere else that.
Preliminary design plans
really
presented to us from the architect.
Okay, so we do have some of those.
Yeah, we maintain that intellectual property.
Okay, that's what I was trying to find.
Yes.
All right. Anybody else? Audience, Dave?
Just very quickly, I think that the issue of replacement versus new construction is a done deal based on the discussion here and after our tour today. I think that Village is going to benefit immensely from the saving of personnel time, as well as other kinds of efficiencies from this new facility. It looks to me like an awful lot of employees are spending 15 or 20% of their time coping with the building deficiencies, and that's going to be an improvement for the citizens. I don't see a TIF as, as a resident of Downers Grove, I'm still going to be paying the building, whether it's a TIF or it is not a TIF. The timing varies a little bit, but so a TIF isn't available. If the TIF is available to us, I think we should use it. And the location, as much as technology is supposedly reducing the requirement for the downtown location, I think as a symbol of the downtown and as a visible center of the village, plus just the raw convenience for people to go to, because a lot of people are still going to go into the building for services, not to mention all the people who come here for meetings. I think the downtown location is the best. And as far as whether you build townhomes or apartment buildings, I think that kind of depends on a little bit more research on traffic and economics.
Thank you.
From a planning standpoint, if these facilities need to be abandoned, what happens, and what estimations excuse me, are done to determine the costs involved to do that?
And demolition, relocation, that kind of stuff? Yeah, those will be line items.
Where does the police department?
That's really getting into what some of the other commissioners were talking here tonight about some of the different options within this property. If we build new, do we move once, do we move twice? How does that affect the saleability and development options and the balance of the site? They'll come with cost estimates.
I'm trying to ask it more in the sense of assuming that this facility is used, let's say. Where does this operation, the village and the police go to?
It's part of what we would have to work. It's part of what we would have to work out.
To be determined.
The temporary relocation.
Yeah. You're identifying one of the things that would have to get sorted out, to be sure, but we don't have that answer tonight.
Some replacement plans called for us to not temporarily relocate. We would build it in such a place that we just, on Friday we're operating here, and on Monday we move into new buildings. Some plans called for Village Hall to temporarily relocate off-site. Some of them called for both the police and the Village Hall to look. So it really does get into the nitty-gritty of building design, that kind of stuff.
Anybody else? Okay. Any last council comments for the evening? Leslie?
Yeah, I have one comment. I just want to go back to what he was saying about if you sell off land now, what is the plan for going forward? I understand and semi-agree with that comment. I think that I wish knowing that we were going to be doing this replacement in '99, in hindsight, I wish we would have been thinking about that in terms of the tax base, so that we wouldn't have to start from square one. So I think that point is important to keep in mind as we go through. If we have more land than we realistically need, then sure, I'm fine with selling off some and redeveloping the property for townhomes or condos or apartments, whatever that case may be. But I think coupled with that, we do also really need to think critically about what we're doing with our tax base and what we're doing for that maintenance. Like you said, we've gotten better in the next decade, but seriously consider that if we are maxing out all of these areas in which we could potentially use a TIF funds, we really need to think about future planning for that and not pigeonhole ourselves into being so afraid to raise taxes even just a little bit that we're doing a long-term disservice to our residents.
And the value of the land actually makes the point to move forward quickly because we're in a robust economy.
Right.
I hate to have to sell this off during a recession. And so, how'd you lose X millions of dollars in value?
Greg?
No, I'll let it go.
Great. If we got nothing else, we have a motion adjourned.